Hello, it is Rachel, and welcome to episode 312 of Your Parenting Long Game. In this episode, I'm going to talk about specific, what I call influence leaks. So I'm going to talk about a specific area where you may be losing influence with your child without even being aware of it. Once we understand what influence leaks we're making, we can plug those leaks so that we do become more of a powerful, positive influence in our homes who can foster better behavior and more resilience in our children. Now, in the last two episodes, I've talked about a two-step long game formula that will help you bring more peace and resilience and confidence to your home. And the influence leaks that I'm going to talk about in this episode are related to that second part of the long game formula. So if you recall, the first part of the long game formula, which I talked about in episode 310, was if we want to foster better behavior and more resilience in our kids, we need to understand what's fueling their negative behavior, moods, and attitudes. Because once we understand what's fueling it and we address that issue, they do behave more positively and they do know how to be more resilient. The second step of the long game formula is that in order to figure out what's going on beneath our kids' behavior and address what's going on with our kids' behavior, we have to be a powerful, positive influence. That's what I'm going to be talking about more on this episode. Because what happens is when most parents come to me, they don't even realize that they are leaking influence by the interactions they have with their kids and the actions they are taking. So I want to do these next few episodes where I'm going to really talk about specific influence leaks so you can see where you are leaking influence yourself. Now, if you want to know specifically what is going on in your situation, if you want to know what's under your kids' negative behaviors, moods, and attitudes, and if you want to know your specific influence leaks, I do have a free informal assessment you can take. It's a checklist where you can see what is likely going on for your child. And I will tell you, at the time that I am recording this episode, I'm also offering a free 30-minute call with me to go over your assessment and to determine what a long game solution would look like. So if you want to apply what you're learning in these episodes to your situation, head on over to the show notes for this episode. There you will find that free informal assessment as well as your ability to sign up for a free call with me. That is on my website at rachel-bailey.com/312. Because as I said, when most parents come to me, they are not aware that they are leaking influence. And you may not be aware that you are leaking influence, but I can tell you there are certain symptoms or things that happen in your home which will tell you that you probably are leaking influence. For example, let's say you give your child a dinner and they don't feel like eating it and they explode or they get really upset when they see what you've made for dinner. If you try to diffuse that situation and what you try to do doesn't diffuse the situation, maybe even makes it worse, then chances are you are leaking influence. If you are having trouble with the routines, the morning routine, the after school routine, the evening routines, you're asking your kids to do the things they have to do and they're not listening to you, there's a lot of resistance or there's a lot of power struggle or drama, chances are you are leaking influence. If you are bringing up subjects with your child outside of the moment, maybe you're talking to them about how the fact that the morning isn't going well, or that after school, maybe their behavior isn't the best. You're trying to bring this up with them outside of the moment and they don't want to listen to you, or when you start to talk to them about it, they go right into yuck or discomfort and they try to resist. Those are also symptoms that you are likely leaking influence. Because when you are a powerful, positive influence, when you have plugged your influence leaks, you can diffuse drama more easily. When you're a powerful, positive influence, you can ask your kids to do things and they're more likely to listen. When you're a powerful, positive influence and you bring up topics outside of the moment, it doesn't create more yuck for your child. In fact, it can create even more connected moments. So I want you to get to the point where you are a powerful, positive influence. So I'm going to be talking to you about influence leaks. In the next few episodes, I'll be giving you specific examples. But I want you to know that what's under almost all of these examples is we are leaking influence when we approach a child and we are not regulated ourselves. In order to be a powerful, positive influence, you actually have to start by being regulated yourself. In fact, I always say there's an indirect relationship between our level of yuck and our level of influence, meaning the more yuck we have, the less influence we have. The less yuck we have, the more influence we have. So it's really important to be aware of our state of yuck if we want to be that powerful, positive influence. Many of our influence leaks come because we are unintentionally doing things that get us dysregulated and we lose our influence. So I want to talk about one thing that happens to so many of us that leads to us becoming dysregulated, something that we actually have a lot of control over. And that is the expectations we set for our kids' behavior. Because honestly, most of the time what we do is we set expectations based on what we want our kids to do, based on what would be nice for them to do, not on what they are realistically going to do. And then when they don't behave or feel the way we want them to, we go into yuck because there's this distance between what we expected and what's actually happening that upsets us. So if we expect our kids to stay in bed, but they don't, we're going to get really upset. If we expect our kids to do their homework without rushing and then they rush through their homework, we're going to get really upset. In fact, the further the distance between what we expect our child to do and what they actually do, the more dysregulated we become and the less influence we have. So I want to explain this really practically using a story of a family with a dad named Mike, a mom named Jessie, and their son Carter. Now, Mom and Jessie also have another daughter, but we're going to focus mostly on Carter's behavior, specifically Carter's behavior at his sister's birthday party. So his little sister had a party, and Mike and Jessie, the parents, wanted to make this party great. And they really had created a wonderful party, but what happened was Carter's behavior at that party was horrendous. Carter was whining and complaining at the party. Carter was going up to his parents and being disrespectful. At one point, Carter even took one of his sister's presents out of her hands and started opening it. And Carter's parents, obviously, Mike and Jessie, they were mortified. And they became really upset with this behavior. And they told him that his behavior was unacceptable. They told him that if he didn't stop, they were going to take away things he cared about. He couldn't have screen time. They wouldn't take him to his friend's house. And as you can imagine, that did not influence more positive behavior in Carter. But as you're thinking about it, I'm sure you can understand why Mike and Jessie reacted the way they did. Carter's behavior was awful, so of course they're going to have that reaction, especially when they expect something different from them. And this is really where the problem lies in this situation. So when Mike and Jessie were talking to me about this party, of course, as a parent, I could relate to why they were so upset. But I also wanted to help them understand what was going on. So I said to them, hey, how did you expect Carter to react? And they said, well, we just wanted him to attend the party and be his sister's brother and just be there without making any trouble. But I asked them to think about situations in the past. How often did Carter really behave the way they wanted him to behave, especially when his sister was getting a lot of attention? And when they thought about it, they said, well, pretty much never. And that's the thing. They set their expectations based on what they wanted to happen, not what was actually likely to happen. And we do this all the time. We're not thinking about what is likely to happen, and we're certainly not thinking about why that is likely to happen. And because there was such a distance between what they expected and what he was actually doing, they went into yuck. They approached him from a state of yuck, and they lost all of their influence. They would have liked to influence his behavior so that he became more respectful, so that he whined less, but they couldn't influence that behavior when they were in yuck themselves. Now, before we get into what Mike and Jessie could do differently the next time something like this happened and what they ended up doing the next time this happened, I want to tell you that it's actually really simple to determine if this is one of your influence leaks. It's actually really simple to figure out if your expectations are realistic, because all you have to do is take a situation where you tend to lose your cool and then ask yourself, what do I expect or want to happen in that situation? And once you do that, you can ask yourself, in the past, in situations very similar to this one, has my child consistently acted the way I want them to act? If the answer is no, then your expectation is not realistic yet. Once you realize that your expectation is not realistic yet, you can set new expectations. And then if your child does something, you will not be approaching them from a place of dysregulation, from a place of your yuck or your fight or flight response. You will approach them differently and you can have more influence. Now, again, once Jessie and Mike recognized that they didn't have realistic expectations, we could use that to help them figure out what to do differently next time. So they did have a family gathering shortly after the birthday party with Carter's sister, and we talked about what was likely to happen. And they told me that what was likely to happen was that Carter was going to get jealous and Carter was probably going to behave negatively. And then we used the first part of the long game formula to understand what he needed to do better. I started to talk to him about what his yuck was. Obviously, they had identified that he was jealous of his sister, But he also probably had some yuck that I described based on the fact that when he saw his sister's presence, there was a lot of novelty there. And a child's brain is drawn to novelty. Their brain, whenever they see something new, says, hey, that's new. I want to know what it is. I want to see it. And the fact that he was unable to touch his sister's presence also created a lot of yuck for him. Now, that does not mean that we allow him to touch his sister's presence. We just have to understand that yuck exists and he needs the skills to be able to handle that yuck. That is the whole first part of the long game formula, is to address their yuck and to give them skills to do something differently, to do something more positive. So because they had set those realistic expectations, they knew to approach Carter differently before the next family gathering. They let him know what was likely to happen. They let him know that his sister was likely to get attention. They let him know that she might get something that he didn't, and they helped him figure out how to handle that situation. Now, was this perfect in the moment? No. Did Carter still start to get upset? Yes. But they expected him to get upset. They expected that this wasn't going to go perfectly because they'd only practiced it a little bit before this new family gathering. So when they approached Carter this time, they approached him from a place of influence. They were not dysregulated. And what they actually said was, hey, Carter, it's really hard when people are paying attention to your sister, isn't it? And they said, it's really hard when your sister gets new things and you didn't get that new thing too, huh? They were able to address his yuck, meet his need, and Carter's behavior was much better in that situation. And it was better because they had addressed what was under his behavior. They had addressed his yuck. They had given him some skills. And when things didn't go perfectly, they expected that it wouldn't go perfectly, which meant that they were powerful, positive influences, and they were able to calm him down more quickly and motivate better behavior. All of this came from the fact that they set realistic expectations. So I want you to think about how this relates to you. I want you to think about where you are setting unrealistic expectations. For example, what are you expecting your children to be able to do during those morning routines, those after school routines, those evening routines? If you're seeing a lot of resistance and a lot of drama, what are you expecting? Are you expecting it to go better than it usually goes? Because if you are, you're going to be creating unnecessary yuck for you, and you're going to decrease your influence. Think similarly about what are you expecting from your kids when you tell them no, or when things don't go their way. Are you expecting them to react in a way that you want them to react, rather than in a way that is likely that they are going to react? When you have those unrealistic expectations, you are going to go into yuck and you are going to lose your influence. Now, I want to reiterate that setting realistic expectations does not mean that we are giving up on trying to motivate better behavior or more resilience. In fact, it's the opposite. We want to address our kids' yuck. We want to teach them the tools so they can listen to us when we ask them to do things, so they can handle it when we tell them no. But we are going to have more of a powerful, positive influence when we set realistic expectations first, realizing that they can't do what we want them to do yet. This is all about increasing our influence and giving them what they need to be successful. Changing our expectations creates a positive chain reaction, because when we have more realistic expectations, we don't go into yuck. We don't get dysregulated. That means we can influence our children more, and that means they can feel and behave more positively. And every time we are able to stay regulated and help them through a situation, we increase our influence for the future as well. We also strengthen our relationship. So again, there's this positive reaction that happens when we reset our expectations and make them more realistic. So plugging this influence leak, setting more realistic expectations, it improves our influence. It improves their behavior. It improves our relationship. And ultimately, we have the ability to teach them how to be more resilient in the future. That is long game parenting. Again, if you want to hear a little bit more about what is causing your child's negative behavior, moods, and attitudes, and where you may be leaking influence, in addition to not setting realistic expectations, I have that informal assessment where you can see other things that may be going on for your child and for you. And again, at this time of recording, I'm also including a free 30-minute call with me where we can discuss your results and talk about what it would look like to be parenting in a way that increases your influence, gives them what they need, and makes you a long game parent. Find that and other free resources on the show notes for this episode at rachel-bailey.com/312. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you again soon.